Hello everyone. I'm Doris from Susan's family. Today, I'm bringing you the pink version of the Tulip Lily vest. For this electronic tutorial, you can find the chart on the website. Search for susud.com to access it. This vest consists of front and back pieces. Start by knitting the front and back pieces. After completing, sew them together. Once sewn, pick up stitches for the cuffs and neckline. Finally, make the decorations for the vest. The front piece is divided into the hem, the body, and the shoulder parts. Let's start by learning how to knit the hem. Take a look at the chart. The hem uses the alternating cable cast-on method. Cast on while you knit. Then, work back and forth along the cast-on row. A horizontal line in the chart represents a purl stitch. Blank squares represent knit stitches. Pay attention to the following during the knitting process. Since you're knitting back and forth in rows, the chart shows what it looks like from the right side. The first row is considered the right side of the piece. Therefore, on the wrong side, you need to knit the stitches shown in the chart. Now, let me demonstrate the specific knitting method. The hem section is knitted using 3 types of yarn held together. Take 1 strand from each of 3 skeins. Combine these 3 strands and knit them together. The colorway of my yarn is not for reference. For your convenience and clearer visibility, I will demonstrate with a single strand of cotton yarn. When I mention 1 strand later, it actually refers to 3 strands. For specific yarn details, color choices, and needle sizes, please refer to the detail page of our product and the paper instructions. Before we start knitting, let's familiarize ourselves with the circular needle. It consists of 2 needles connected at the tail ends. The tips of the circular needle are the same as straight needles. You don't need to switch needles frequently while knitting, which makes it more convenient to use. Start by casting on. Make a slip knot with the yarn tail. Leave the yarn tail slightly longer, making it easier to weave in the ends later. Hold one end of the circular needle in your left hand. Insert the needle into the loop. Adjust the size of the loop slightly. This is the first stitch. This first stitch counts as a purl stitch. Hold the other end of the circular needle with your right hand in a pencil grip. Wrap the yarn once around your right pinky. Gently pinch the yarn between your ring finger and middle finger. Place the yarn between your index finger and middle finger. This is the basic posture for knitting with straight needles. Next, place the right needle above the yarn. Insert into the loop on the left needle from front to back. Use your right index finger to guide the yarn. Wrap the yarn and draw out. Place it on the left needle. Don't pull the yarn too tight, otherwise, it will be difficult to pick up stitches later. This is the second stitch. This stitch is a knit stitch. You can see that this yarn tail is below. Next is a purl stitch. Place the right needle underneath the yarn. Pass it from back to front between the 2 loops. Pay attention, here is the middle position of the loop. Do not pass through the loop. Wrap the yarn and draw out. Place it on the left needle. This is the third stitch. This stitch is a purl stitch. You can see that the yarn tail is above. Continue with a knit stitch. Place the right needle above the yarn. Insert the needle. Wrap the yarn and draw out. This is the 4th stitch. Next, purl stitch. Place the right needle below the yarn. Insert the needle. Wrap the yarn and draw out. This is the 5th stitch. The starting row follows a pattern of alternating 1 purl stitch and 1 knit stitch. If the yarn tail is above, knit 1. If the yarn tail is below, purl 1. Continue knitting down until you reach the required number of stitches. You will notice that, with this method of casting on, one loop will be in front, and one loop will be in back, alternating like this. The sample has fewer stitches. Let's focus on the method. After you've cast on the corresponding number of stitches, you can double check the stitch count. That concludes the casting on process. Now, let's begin with row 1. For this row, refer to the chart from right to left. The first 2 squares are blank, indicating that you should knit the first 2 stitches. Insert the right needle from front to back into the first loop on the left needle. Note that you are inserting into the loop, not between 2 loops. Wrap the yarn and draw out, while releasing the loop on the left needle. That completes one knit stitch. Continue with another knit stitch. Insert the right needle from front to back into the next loop on the left needle. Wrap the yarn and draw out. The second knit stitch is now completed. The texture below is formed by the knit stitches. In the chart, the next symbol is a horizontal line, which indicates a purl stitch. Move the yarn above the right needle. Then insert the right needle from back to front into the loop on the left needle. Wrap the yarn and draw out. Release the loop. That completes one purl stitch. Continue with a knit stitch. First, move the yarn back below the right needle. Then insert into the loop and knit. Next, work a purl stitch. Don't forget to move the yarn above the right needle. Then insert from back to front into the loop. Wrap the yarn and draw out. That completes one purl stitch. Once done, let's take a look. The purl stitch creates a tile-shaped texture, with a horizontal thread across the top. This row consists of one knit stitch, alternate with one purl stitch. Remember to move the yarn before each stitch, otherwise, you'll have extra stitches. When knitting a knit stitch, the yarn should be below the right needle. When knitting a purl stitch, the yarn should be above the right needle. Continue following this pattern until there are only 2 loops left on the left needle. Once you reach that position, knit 2 stitches. This completes the first row. Now, let's move on to the second row. Turn the work over, transfer it to your left hand. Hold the yarn with your right hand. The chart for this row starts from left to right. But you need to knit the different stitches in this row. The first two symbols indicate knit stitches, so you will purl these stitches. Place the right needle under the yarn. Purl 2 stitches. The next symbol indicates a purl stitch, but here you will knit this stitch. Then comes the symbol for a knit stitch, so you will purl 1 stitch. Besides referring to the chart, you can also follow the texture of the piece. If the next stitch forms a braid shape, knit 1 stitch. If the shape is like a tile, purl 1 stitch. Continue with the pattern of alternating 1 knit stitch and 1 purl stitch to finish this row. Pay attention that the last 2 stitches are both purl stitches. This completes the second row. Now, work on the third row. Turn the piece over. Start with 2 knit stitches. Then purl 1 stitch. Continue alternating 1 knit stitch and 1 purl stitch. Finish this row in this pattern. The last 2 stitches are both knit stitches. This completes the third row. Now, let me show you how to count the rows. When the starting tail is on the left side, the side facing us is the right side of the fabric. You can count the column of knit stitch braids. 1 braid represents 1 row. This column has 3 braids. That means 3 rows have been completed. For the remaining rows of the hem, follow this method and continue stitching according to the texture. Complete the remaining rows of section 1. This concludes the explanation for hem. Let's move on to the body section. It is divided into section 1 and section 2. Section 1 continues from the hem part. Keep knitting back and forth upwards. For section 2, you need to form the armpits on both sides. Please let me demonstrate the specific steps. Before starting, you need to switch yarns. Here, I will use a sample to demonstrate the color change method. The yarn used in the demonstration is not for reference. One of the yarns will no longer be needed. Leave about 10 centimeters and cut it off. Pay attention and refer to the pattern. Make sure you don't cut the wrong yarn. Now you have 2 strands of yarn left. The body section is made with 4 strands of yarn held together. Take out the additional 2 skeins of yarn that you will need. Pull out one end from each. Combine them together. Make a slip knot. Leave a slightly longer tail at the beginning. Then start with the first row of section 1. In the chart, this row has symbols for knit stitches. This means you will knit across the entire row. Insert the right needle into the first loop on the left side. Then wrap the remaining 2 strands on the right needle. Next, take the new yarn you prepared. Hang the loop on the right needle as well. Slightly adjust the loop size. Then hold these 4 strands with your right hand. Draw out the stitch. This completes the yarn change. When you run out of a strand of yarn later, and need to join a new yarn, use the same method to join the yarn, then continue to knit with these 4 strands. Keep going until you complete this row. This completes the first row of section 1 of the body. Next, work the second row. For this row, work the purl stitches according to the chart. The second row is now completed. For the remaining rows in section 1, knit all the odd-numbered rows. Purl all the even-numbered rows. Continue to complete the remaining rows in section 1. This concludes the explanation of knitting section 1 of the body. Next, we'll work on the first row of section 2. Start by binding off the underarm stitches. Before binding off, refer to the chart first. Separate the stitches that need to be bound off at the beginning of the first row with stitch markers. Refer to the chart for the exact number of stitches. After marking, continue with the same yarn. First, slip the first stitch without knitting it. Then knit the next stitch. After completing this, use the left needle to pick up the previous stitch. Place it over the next one. This completes one bind-off stitch. Continue with one knit stitch. Then use the left needle to pick up the previous stitch again. Place it over the next stitch. This completes another bind-off stitch. Continue with this method. Binding off while knitting the stitches. Bind off the stitches on the right side of the stitch marker. After completing this, you also need to bind off the loop on the right needle. You can now remove the stitch marker. Knit 1. Bind off. This completes the bind-off position for the first row, and you have completed the first knit stitch. Gently pull to tighten the yarn tail. Continue knitting to finish this row. This completes the first row of section 2. Next, knit the second row. Turn the work over. Start in the same way as the first row. You need to bind off stitches. First, separate the stitches to be bound off with a stitch marker. Then slip the first stitch purlwise without knitting it. Next, purl 1. Use the left needle to pick up the previous loop. Cover the next loop. Bind off one stitch. Continue purling while binding off stitches. Bind off the stitches on the right side of the marker. After completing, you also need to bind off this loop on the right needle. Purl 1. Bind off one stitch. Continue to finish this row. The yarn tail needs to be gently pulled to tighten slightly. In the following knitting process, after binding off stitches, you need to pull the yarn tail tight before continuing to knit. This will not be repeated in subsequent instructions. This completes the second row. Now, the third row. Similarly, you need to bind off stitches at the starting position. First, place a stitch marker at the corresponding position. Then bind off the loops on the right side of the marker. Pay attention when binding off. Slip the first stitch without knitting it. Bind off the loops on the right needle as well. Then finish knitting this row. This completes the third row. Continue to complete the fourth row. The fourth row is now completed. Next, knit the fifth row. Slip one stitch without knitting it. Then knit one. Bind off. Then complete the remaining part. The fifth row is now completed. Next, knit the sixth row. Similarly, you only need to bind off one stitch. Then finish knitting the remaining purl stitches. This completes the sixth row as well. Refer to the chart to complete the remaining rows in section 2. This concludes the explanation of knitting for section 2 of the body. Next, let's look at the shoulder part section. This includes the left shoulder part and the right shoulder part. The left and right here refer to the actual left and right when wearing it. Start with the left shoulder part. After completing it, reattach the yarn and knit the right shoulder part. Please watch my demonstration. First, knit row 1 of the left shoulder part. Begin by knitting the corresponding number of stitches. Refer to the chart for the specific stitch count. This completes row 1. Leave the remaining loops on the left needle unknitted for now. Next, row 2. Turn the workpiece. Then slip the first stitch purlwise without knitting it. Next, pick up the second loop from the right side with the left needle. Cover the following loop. This decreases 1 stitch. Then, on the right side of this loop on the right needle, place a stitch marker as a mark. Leave the stitches to the right of the stitch marker unknitted for now. Here, you need to bind off 2 stitches. Purl 1. Bind off 1 stitch. Slightly tighten, then finish the remaining purl stitches. This completes row 2. Next, row 3. Start by knitting the knit stitches normally. Continue knitting until you reach 1 loop on the right of the stitch marker. Reach the designated position. Leave this 1 loop unknitted for now. This completes row 3. Now, knit row 4. Slip the first loop. Then bind off 1 stitch. Purl 1 next. Bind off 1 more stitch. Continue and finish the remaining stitches. Row 4 is completed. Now, row 5. Knit stitches as usual, until you reach 1 loop to the right of the stitch marker. Reach the designated position. Leave this remaining loop unknitted for now. Row 5 is completed. Next, knit row 6. Slip 1 stitch, then bind off 1 stitch. Continue with purl stitches. Finish the remaining stitches. This completes row 6. Now, knit row 7. Again, knit until you reach one loop on the right of the stitch marker. Row 7 is completed. Next, knit row 8. Bind off one stitch. Then finish the remaining stitches. Row 8 is completed. Continue with row 9. From this row on, there's no need to bind off stitches. Finish the loops on the right of the stitch marker. Row 9 is completed. Continue to complete the remaining rows. After finishing the last row, do not bind off the loops on the needle. Take another needle. Move the remaining loops from the left shoulder part onto this needle. Move them to the middle position of the needle. Then leave a tail of about 15 centimeters and cut off the yarn. Pay attention to prevent the loops from coming loose. Up to here, the left shoulder part is completed. Now start with row 1 of the right shoulder part. You also need to bind off stitches at the beginning of this row. First, separate the number of stitches that need to be bound off in row 1 with stitch markers. Refer to the chart for the specific stitch count. Then, slip the first loop off the right needle without knitting it. Next, knit one stitch. Insert the needle. Make a slip knit with the yarn tail. And place it on the right needle. Adjust the loop size slightly. Draw out. Then bind off one stitch. Continue to bind off the remaining stitches. Similarly, after binding off all the loops on the right side of the stitch marker, you also need to bind off the loop on the right needle. Then slightly tighten the yarn. Finish knitting the remaining stitches. This completes the first row. Next, start the second row. Knit purl stitches all the way across this row. Continue until you have one loop left. Reach the position. Do not knit the last loop. Row 2 is now completed. Continue with row 3. Slip the first stitch without knitting it. Then bind off one stitch. Next, knit one stitch. Bind off one stitch again. Finish the remaining stitches. This completes row 3. Now move on to the row 4. Again, do not knit the last loop. Row 4 is now completed. For the remaining rows, use the same method to the left shoulder. Refer to the chart and complete them all. After finishing the last row, transfer the loops to a single straight needle. Then leave a tail of about 15 centimeters and cut off. This completes the right shoulder part. Up to this point, the front piece has been fully explained. Next, let's look at the back piece. It is also divided into the hem, the body, and the shoulder parts. For the hem and body sections, use the same method as for the front piece's hem and body. Only the row count in section 2 is different. Refer to the chart and follow the demonstration for the front piece. Complete the hem and body sections of the back piece. Now, let's look at the shoulder parts. These are also divided into the left and right shoulder parts. The method is similar to that of the front piece. After completing the last row of the back piece's shoulder parts, you need to bind off with the front piece together. Please watch my demonstration. First, complete the right shoulder part. After finishing the last row, perform the bind off. Take out the front piece. Place the right sides of both pieces together. With the wrong sides facing out. Place the back piece on the back, while front piece on the front. Move the loops to the right side of the needle. Use the yarn tail from the back piece to bind off. With the circular needle going from front to back, pass through both the first loops on each of the two needles simultaneously. Knit one stitch. Then again, go through both first loops on the two left needles simultaneously. And knit one stitch. After completing this, pass the first loop on the right needle over the second loop. Repeat this process to bind off all the loops. Now, there is only one loop left on the right needle. Enlarge the loop. Remove the needle. Leave a 10 cm tail and cut off. Then thread the yarn tail through the loop. And slightly tighten. Then thread the yarn tail into a sewing needle. Following the texture on the wrong side of the fabric, weave in the yarn tail. Make sure to weave in several stitches, so that the yarn tail is secured more firmly. Once done, trim any excess. This completes the right shoulder part of the back piece. Continue to finish the left shoulder part. After completing it, use the same method to bind off and join the front and back pieces together. Once completed, tie off and weave in all remaining yarn tails on the wrong side of the fabric. Up to this point, the back piece has been fully explained. Next, we will sew them together. Join the hems and body section one of the front and back pieces. The sewing is done on the right side. Place the front and back pieces with their right sides facing out and wrong sides facing each other. Cut a length of corresponding color yarn and thread it into a sewing needle. You can use a sewing needle to sew. To prevent the fabric pieces from shifting before sewing, use stitch markers to secure the corresponding positions of the front and back pieces. First, place a stitch marker on the bottom edge. Then, at the last row of body section 1, place another stitch marker. The area between these two stitch markers is the sewing position. Select a few points evenly between two stitch markers and place stitch markers there. Place several more stitch markers in practice. Be mindful not to pull or stretch the fabric pieces when placing markers. Ensure both pieces are aligned and lay flat. Now, start sewing. Locate the marked stitch position at the bottom edge of the front piece. Insert the needle from bottom to top. Pick up the horizontal strand between two edge stitches. Pull through. Leave a tail of about 10 centimeters. Then, find the corresponding position on the back piece. Similarly, insert the needle from bottom to top. Pick up the horizontal strand between two edge stitches. Pull through. Gently pull to tighten the tail. When pulling, use your left hand to pinch the reserve tail. This prevents the tail from being pulled out. Continue by inserting the needle into the same position on the front piece, where you previously exited. Pick up the horizontal strand above and sew once. You can now remove the first stitch marker. Then insert the needle into the same position on the back piece, where you previously exited. Pick up the horizontal strand above and pull through. Gently pull to tighten the tail. Next, insert the needle into the exit position on the front piece. Pick up the horizontal strand above and pull through. This is how you sew the front and back pieces together, one stitch at a time, picking up the horizontal strands to sew. Tighten the tail slightly after each section. When pulling, pinch the reserved tail. During the sewing process, you can check if the positions of the two fabric pieces correspond. Verify if the number of sewing strands is the same. If they are different, you need to adjust promptly. You can pick up two strands from the side with more strands and sew them together with one strand from the other side. When you encounter unequal strands later, you can make adjustments this way, it won't be repeated again. When sewing here, just make sure the fabric pieces are aligned. It doesn't matter if you sew a stitch or two incorrectly. Continue sewing upwards, all the way to the position of the first stitch marker at the top. Once you reach the corresponding position, remove the stitch marker. Then take the yarn tail to the wrong side of the fabric. Sew the junction slightly more for reinforcement. Then, pick up a loop from the wrong side of the fabric, and tie off to hide the tail. Hide the yarn tails securely along the texture. Then trim off any excess tails. At the starting position, use the previously left yarn tail to sew a few stitches here for reinforcement. Then hide all the tails on the wrong side of the fabric. This completes the sewing of one side of the front and back pieces. Now, sew the other side of the front and back pieces with the same method.